Dr. Sonya Jensen. You are a neuropathic physician on a mission to change the way women understand their bodies. And today, we will speak about your book, Woman Unleashed. Release your story, revive your hormones, and reclaim your freedom. Dr. Jensen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm excited about our conversation.
Yes, I was reading your book, and you have a super interesting story, your journey. I was reading about the time you were 13 and you had this uh, dual identity or culture clash coming into your head and how you deal with it. I wonder if we could start from there. Can you tell us? I'm not gonna
Mhm.
say it. Can you tell us what was going on in your life? I mean, you are from two different cultures, so also tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that, and then we will talk about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a first generation Indo-Canadian. So my parents immigrated here from India in the 70s. And so often when you're first generation, your parents are still trying to really hold on to the roots from back home and the culture and really trying to navigate this new life in this new world. And I find for us that our first generation, we're kind of tiptoeing between two different cultures, which can feel really disjointing and create a lot of internal battles. And at that time at 13, when you're going through puberty, there's so much change happening in your body and your mind, and you're trying to figure out where your place is in the world. I didn't realize that I was kind of processing a trauma that had happened to me when I was quite young, and my whole lens through which I was looking at the world was one that I just wasn't enough, and me being in this world isn't going to make a difference. And I was actually contemplating taking my life because I just felt so caged in my world, and I felt like I had no choice, no freedom, and just felt really all over the place and just felt so unsupported in some sense, but then also supported in another sense. Because when you come from a community like that, the community you are brought up in, like you have your own family, you have your extended family, and I'm sure it's similar to your culture too. It's like you just have so many people to rely on. So you, on the outside, you kind of feel like, okay, you should be happy, you should have people to talk to all the time, but when you can't relate to them
Mm.
from the space that you're feeling, it's really hard to feel accepted. So you're always feeling like there's something wrong with you. And that's kind of what happened to me in that moment. And that moment changed everything for me because I contemplated that, but then there was something that shifted my view in that moment too, that hey, this doesn't have to be this way. Me taking my life is doing something to my life, not somebody else's, out of anger or resentment or the pain that I'm feeling. It's not going to take the pain away. It may take it away in this physical form right now, but it's so momentary. And I just knew in that time that me being here was important, that I had so much more to learn and give to the world.
And you came to Canada, you were born here or you
I
came
was
to?
born here.
Okay, perfect. So you
Mhm.
grew up with these two identities. When you went to high school, you were expected
Mhm.
to act carefree and enjoy all the liberties mentally and physically that a Canadian girl enjoys. While
Mhm.
you were at home, you were expected to behave in a different way. So this was
Mhm.
creating this traumas. Um, and then, okay, and then what led you to study or your professional path that you are in right
Mhm.
now?
Yeah. So during that time too, at age 13, I was also dealing with anorexia. So I actually recognized in that moment that I was harming myself and my body and almost using food as a weapon rather than nourishment. And food is such a gift in our culture. Like we like surround ourselves with our family when we're surrounding ourselves with food and feasting and doing all these things. And I started to use it as a weapon. And when I had that understanding, I started to recognize how powerful my body was. And as soon as I made a decision to be healthy, all of a sudden, I'm exercising, I'm eating better, I'm drinking water, doing all the basic things, and my whole form changed and my mind started to change and how I even saw myself. So I knew that there was so much power in the human frame. And so I always knew that I would do something along the lines of like health. And I've always wanted to just serve others. That's always just been in me since I was quite young. So I went to high school and then university and studied cell biology. And from there, I didn't really know which avenue I wanted to go to. So I wanted to either do occupational therapy or massage therapy. And I did massage therapy for 1 year and accidentally called the naturopathic school and started asking questions of like, well, what is naturopathic? Like, what is this? Like, what kind of medicine can I use to serve humanity? And as I started to understand its roots and how familiar it was because of my background with Ayurvedic medicine, like ancient Indian medicine, growing up with that in my home, I started to see that, wow, there's so many tools that we can use to serve the body and bring out its innate potential. And that's kind of what drew me into naturopathic medicine.
Wow. And just to share a story of food and culture, in my culture, you equate being a little bit overweight with financial health. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same here.
my family tried to make me fat, and my grandmother used to
Yeah.
beat me up if I didn't eat my whole plate of food. And I grew
Yeah.
up with some kind of, I don't know, like I had to eat all the time to show how good I am doing financially and in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it just took so many years of mental work in order to get rid of that mentality that, it's okay if I don't eat a whole plate, that
Yeah.
it's just, I know there are kids starving somewhere else in the world,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I had to eat this plate of food unto the end and lick my plate. And that
Yeah.
takes so much freaking effort to get rid of these lessons that we are taught, that our parents try
Yeah.
to teach us with good intentions, but sometimes they are just not the best lessons.
Yeah, that reframing is so important because we then get stuck with that belief that this is what equals success, how I look or what I wear or what house I have, like all these things that we get conditioned into thinking that was the same thing in our culture. So, you show your status with food, but then if you gain too much weight, now you're fat and now you're too skinny. Like there was never a perfect zone that you were in.
Mm. Okay, well, now you are into this path, and somewhere along the line, you decided to write this book, Woman
Mhm.
Unleashed. First of all, what was the trigger? That's something that said, I need to write a book and share my lessons and my story with
Yeah.
everybody else.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been working with women now for 12, 13 years, and just noticing that we all have such a similar story, women and men, right? We have these old beliefs, these old patterns, this conditioning from our culture and our families, and what we see in social media or on TV that tells us who we're supposed to be. And when I was working with women and starting to understand their hormonal story, because that's often what I work with, I just knew that there was this link between that story that we tell ourselves and how it's presenting in our physical form. Maybe it's hot flashes and night sweats and weight gain or lack of sleep or lack of energy. But the story actually begins with how we see ourselves and the decisions we make because of our old traumas and our stresses and all the things that dictates how we feel about ourselves and the action that we take with what foods we eat then or who we surround ourselves with or a self-worth talk that we have in our mind is going to dictate our physiology in our body. And that's going to dictate how it's going to then present itself in our bodies. And my own personal story, I started to recognize that that trauma that I was speaking to when I was young was dictated so much of the decisions that I made in my 20s. And when I started to unravel that and started to understand, like, wow, okay, I'm having these conditions show up in my body, and it's because I'm in pain, like my inner child is in pain and needing to express itself and heal. But all of that emotion has been stored in my uterus or my ovaries, and it's finding its way out. And when I started to piece those two together, I went through a really bad divorce at that time, which also culturally is just not something that you do. And so it put me on this journey of self-discovery. And from there, I've known that there's a book brewing inside of me. And this past 2 years when COVID started, that was the final push for me. I'm like, I need this out there so that women start to, and men start to really understand that connection, that our stress and how we perceive our stress in our world and ourselves is going to dictate our health and what our biology does.
Okay, because my knowledge of science is so limited. Can you
Mm.
tell us, as if I was a 6-year-old kid, what is
Yeah.
hormones and a hormonal
Yes.
story that you talk about in your book?
Yeah, so hormones are messengers. They
Okay.
basically get a message from your world. So, for example, you can have a thought in your mind about something, or maybe you have to rush to a meeting or something's going on, and all of a sudden your brain wakes up to understand, okay, what kind of action steps does he need in order to perform the next step? So often that brain is sourcing from old experience, like memory. So, for example, if you're rushing to a meeting or you're rushing to get your kids to school, what's happening in the brain is, okay, when have I felt this before? So
Mm.
it wakes up your emotional body of like, okay, when have we felt this sensation before? Maybe it was a time where we were in some sort of stress or trauma, or, as a child, we weren't heard and taken care of. Maybe there's some story there. It then tells this other part of your brain, your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland, to spread the message in your body through your hormones that he needs stress hormones to help him run, to help him deal with the stress that's at hand. And so when we're constantly using that side of our nervous system, we get stuck in a state of survival because we always feel like in danger. But we could just be sitting in traffic. We could just
Mm.
be thinking about our kids. We could just be in maybe an argument with our partner, but that cycle is exactly the same. So as this cycle keeps going, that other cycle that helps us thrive, like hormones, messengers that help us thrive, get better sleep, more energy, better libido, better relationships, all these things, they have to take a back seat because your body's first priority is to help you survive.
Okay. As women and us too as men, we
Mm,
are constantly told that we are not enough, and I
mm,
think this is mostly for of financial purposes of big corporations. I used to be a
mm,
financial advisor, and I see this that corporations try to tell women, oh, in order for you to be pretty, you need to buy this brand of makeup
yeah.
and have this bag. And for us men, advertisers play with our insecurities, and we need to have
Mhm,
this the latest iPhone to signal to the female that we can provide, and we need to have this luxury
yeah.
car because we need to show our capacity to whatever. So we are constantly told that we are not enough, and sometimes it's hard to break from that belief that is I don't know, projected towards us every day of our life. So, how do we start believing that, yes, we are enough and we don't need to
Yeah.
have this latest, I don't know, high heel brand of shoes in order to be the perfect woman?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And I think you just asking that question is planting a seed of change, right? So as soon as we start to ask ourselves why we do what we do, so when we get that feeling of like needing something in order to look a certain way or behave a certain way, feel a certain way, asking yourselves, where does this actually come from?
Mm.
Like, where does this belief actually come from that I need that in order to feel joy and happiness in my life? And once we start asking that question, now we're out of our emotional brain. So what marketing does, it's targeting your emotions, right?
Mm.
It knows how you want to feel. So once we can come out of that emotional brain and into that logic, frontal, rational brain, we can start asking more questions like, is that actually how I define success? Is that the life that I want to live? And once we start asking that, now we're observing ourselves. We start to observe our actions, our thoughts, and who we're letting influence our thoughts. And the more we do that, the more unattached we become, because we have like 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. And they're going to be coming from all different directions, but it's our job to discern which thought is going to serve me and my true essence. So, this is why I wrote the book. So, people really have tools for self discovery. So, you start to understand, how do I define success? Like, what kind of life do I want to live? Who am I? Like, who is this essence that's telling me these things? So the more we question, the more we pause between that stimulus that's coming in and the response and reaction that we're having. If we can increase that gap in between, that response time, then we're not reactive in like, here's my credit card, I need that. We're more like, hey, okay, let's pause, let's breathe, and let's really understand what the why is behind that decision.
Wow, that's so nicely explained. If you ever decide to change career, you could also be a financial coach because
Oh, yeah.
that's the biggest
I'll keep that
problem.
in mind.
Yeah, that's the biggest problem that like my ex clients used to be triggered by all these messages that they were getting, and I wish I could have explained it as well as you just did. Okay, so next question. So we have all these hormones that are sometimes are causing imbalances in our head,
Mhm,
in our bodies, and sometimes they damage our relationship. So how can we
mhm,
prevent some of those imbalance? How can we have more
mhm.
balance flow or management of our hormones?
Yeah, so first it's understanding what they do and which hormones are maybe off balance. So I always say testing is really important to understand where your hormones are at and what they're doing and what to expect from them. So for example, for men, men have a cycle that changes every single day, whereas women that are menstruating have a cycle that changes every month. So understanding that men's testosterone is pulsating throughout the day. So I could ask you a question now, you may have an answer now, but your answer may change in a couple of hours and your mood may shift with that. And that, so if your counterpart understands that, we can then understand, okay, when's the best time? When's their peak time when we can approach our partner with a change or a question or something? Same goes for men and women. And when it comes to a woman's cycle, understanding that the first half of a woman's cycle, she's going to have more energy after she's already menstruated. Her estrogen and testosterone are going to be higher. So she's going to feel like being out more. And this is where like she's got just more ability to handle more things. But as soon as she ovulates and she's in her second half of her cycle, her libido is going to go down. So her sex drive is going to go down. Her energy is going to be a little bit lower because that half of her cycle is all about being internal. So then the expectations start to change within a relationship because now we're understanding where each other are at. And then as women go through perimenopause, when we start to switch into those later wisdom years of menopause, men are also going through andropause. So hormones are changing, where our hormones are declining at a natural rate. So understanding that that's happening and then knowing, okay, what influences my hormones? Stress, toxicity in my environment, what I eat. If I'm not eating organic, I'm taking in a lot of hormones from my food, what I'm putting on my body, like products. So once you start to understand what's influencing my hormones and start to change that, then you start to get different results. And then seeking help, like finding someone that can explain all of that to you and say, here's some herbs that you can take. Here's nutritionally what you can do to help support your hormones and the messages that they give. Here's some stress tools that you should incorporate every single day. Because what we do every single day matters more than what we do once in a while. So those daily habits, like, are
Mm,
you sleeping?
mm.
Are you eating well? Are you drinking water? What time are you waking up? Are you on your phone all day? And then that's, changing your melatonin and your sleep hormone. So asking these questions to ourselves will then create more room for answers to come.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I had to take a pause every time you finish a sentence. Just I'm digesting all the new information. Okay,
Mm,
so this I had a female friend or family
mhm,
member or acquaintance. I'm not gonna say who, but who, as a child, was sexually molested by her uncle, and
mm,
this created some trauma in
mhm.
her. And sometimes this friend of
Yeah.
mine cries because whatever she's reliving
Mm,
that trauma. So I wonder how these traumas that we suffer in
mm,
our infancy, and it could have been a man, a
yeah.
boy being molested, it happens all the time as well.
Yeah.
How do they influence our hormones as we grow older?
Yeah. Yeah. So, that tender age, there's so much going on. And that was the experience that I had too. So I can really relate to that. And when you've had an experience like that, it rocks your world because it's taking away trust. You no longer can trust yourself. You no longer trust your environment. So you're very vigilant in how you're viewing your environment all the time. So you're always in a state of survival. So if you're again stuck in that state of survival, those other hormones that are trying to activate themselves as you're growing, they can't do it to the best of their ability because your body's priority is to help you survive that moment and that dangerous time. So our whole mindset, our whole everything changes in a sense that the lens that we see ourselves through and the world is one that's not safe, one where our voice was not heard. So it's not safe to also speak up. So then we don't speak. And then also we can't trust our decisions. So then we're always looking to the outside world to decide things for us instead of knowing that the trust is in here. So when that's happening, our body is storing those emotions. So often for women, I will see that if they were in a space where they couldn't use their voice, they have thyroid issues that come up. So now there's, problems that may show up with their weight gain or their hair loss or depression. These things start to show up because of that loss of identity in that moment. For a woman that's not able to trust, she may have challenges in intimacy with her partner. She may have challenges trusting men or other individuals. So then she can't give herself, like she can't open up her heart. She's going to be closed in order to keep herself safe. So if we understand that all the decisions that we make are to help us keep safe, because that's what the brain is doing, that's the way the brain has been wired, we can then again question that. And then we can start to understand, what is it that I actually do want? Like, how do I want to live my life? Is this going to chain me for the rest of my life? Or am I going to break free out of this so that I can actually live the life that I deserve with happiness and joy? And often I find people think that we have to completely not talk about it or leave it in the past so we can move forward. I say the opposite. I feel like the more we embrace what's happened in our story, the easier it is to move forward, because you have to feel the grief of what was and what happened and what could have been. You have to feel the shadow aspect of what happened, because there is darkness around that. But without darkness, there's no light. So in order for us to move towards the light, we really have to acknowledge that this part of us is a part of what makes us who we are right now.
Well, I'm just gonna stay there for a little bit longer. So, how do
Yeah.
we feel that grief and how we get it out of
Yeah.
our body by
Yeah.
telling our dear friends about our past or finding some kind of
Mm,
therapy or what is it? How
yeah.
do you get that sorrow out of your body?
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone. For me, movement has always been my medicine. So I found when I found yoga and meditation, that was one avenue that really helped support me take it out of my body and into a space of logic. So then I could speak about it. So then I could have the resources like friends, like counselors, like things like that, that can help support me move through that healing. A lot of it for me was really working on my inner child and really recognizing and loving her. So I did
Mm.
a lot of inner child work. I have a picture of myself when I was young, 5 years old, on my phone. So she's the first thing that I see when I open my phone, so that I can constantly go back into like loving her. So I use a lot of visualization and meditation, but for somebody else, maybe it's doing treatments like EMDR, or there's internal family system treatment, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, there's all these avenues that you could take, but finding someone that you can feel comfortable with in opening that door and unraveling that door. And it takes time and work, and it doesn't happen overnight, right? So just being graceful towards yourself.
Okay, next question. So, recently I had a friend who went to India. He wanted to
Mm-hmm.
become a yoga teacher, and funny
Mm-hmm.
enough, he got stuck in India due to COVID, and
Mm-hmm.
he went for 3 months, and he ended up spending almost a whole year because there were traveling restrictions. Anyways, this friend, he wanted to show me breath work, and this is
Mm-hmm.
something I had never heard of before, and at the first time this friend wanted to show me all these things that he had learned, I thought he was a little bit on the crazy side. But
Uh-huh.
then he started working with me and we started doing breath work together. And I find that it did, in fact, release a lot of my stress. And you talk about breath
Yeah.
work a little bit in your book as well. So can you tell
Yeah.
us, for the rest of the audience who the
Yeah.
past me who never heard about this before, what is it
Yeah.
and how can it alleviate our stress?
Yeah, I mean, well, what is breath? It's prana, it's life force, right? So breath is how we fuel our cells in our body with oxygen. And without oxygen, our cells could not live. We could not live. So it literally is our life force. So by using breath work, because often you will find people are breathing from up here, like in their chest. instead of belly breathing and using their diaphragm to actually take in a full breath. So the moment we take in a full breath, the lungs expand, the heart has more room, and we're bringing in this nourishment from the environment, this oxygen that's going to then go and like move our blood into different areas that need it for healing to happen. So different kind of breath work does different things. So there's one breath called the Kalabati breath, which is a breath of fire. So you're like pumping your belly in, and while you're passively having like exhaling through your nose, but actively exhaling through your nose and passively inhaling. And as you're doing that, you're creating more fire within your system. So then that's going to help your digestive system because it's going to fuel some of those enzymes and all those things. So there's like some real science behind certain types of breath, because what it's doing, it's also relaxing your nervous system. If our nervous system is in that survival mode, everything's contracted. We're not digesting, we're not sleeping, we're not healing. But if we're in a parasympathetic mode, whereas rest and digest, breath work can take you there to help you digest your food so you can digest life, to help you heal wounds because now there's more circulation in your body and more blood flow. And it's going to help you feel more at ease. So then we're going to respond to life in a different way as well.
Well, Dr. Jensen, I know that when a person sits down to write a book, they have to create this avatar. They have to imagine they are talking to this other person. And that other person in your book, I know it was another woman, but I had to tell you as a man, I found a lot of value also reading, not only because we are also human beings and I can apply the knowledge that you share in your book, but also to understand with the woman in my life and the things that they go through. So I found it very valuable. And although you were thinking of women when you wrote it, I like to suggest to my listeners, men, to also give it a chance. So I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. So it's called Woman Unleash, Release Your Story, Revive Your Hormones, and Reclaim Your Freedom. And you can find me at drsonyajensen.com or on Instagram. And that's also the same handle, Dr. Sonya Jensen.
Okay, and all those links will be in the show notes. Dr. Jensen, thank you so much. I enjoyed this conversation so much.
Thank you.